Good morning. It is Friday, Erev Shabbos, the 17th day of Menachem Av. And today we continue chapter 5 of the Igeret HaKodesh, the holy letters of the Alter Rebbe. And we started the 5th letter on Monday. And then he started with a question about the story of King David. When David, it says, David made himself a name. And there's different interpretation. What does it mean he made a name? This is the story when he fought the war and he buried the dead of the enemies that he killed. And that was, he made himself a name. This is one interpretation, that he was very kind, that he takes care even of the enemies dead. Another interpretation was that he made himself a name as a person, a fierce warrior, that he was able to eliminate so many of his enemies. And then there is a Zohar explanation that says he made a name that it does not refer to what this part of the story, but it refers to the fact that the Torah says then that he did kindness. And what name did he make? He made God's name. And the Zohar said, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, Man Ovid Shmo Kadisha B'chol Yomeh, who makes God's name every day? Man de Yoiv Tzedakah L'Miskenei. He who gives tzedakah, or gives charity to the poor. The Zohar says that when you give charity, when you do kindness, you create God's name. And that was the question, what exactly does that mean, making God's name? So from Monday until yesterday, we went in length in explaining that the name of Hashem, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey, represents the way Hashem brings and condenses His light and His energy. The Yud represents that which is above logic, all the way down to bringing down to the understanding and the emotions and then the actions, which is represented in the Hey. The Hey represents the exterior part of the creation, the exterior part of the logic, the exterior part of the words. And this is the Yud leads down to the Hey, and the Hey brings about the creation of this physical world. That's what we explained. You can go back if you want to understand deeper. You can go back to the previous lessons on YouTube of this week. Now here it comes to finally bringing the explanation what it means that a person who gives tzedakah, a person who does chesed, he makes God's name. Meaning that just like God condenses himself and is charitable to create the creation, so too, that when the person does that, when he gives from himself, and he gives and he shares his goodness to someone else, that is it triggers and arouses by Hashem to do the same. And he's going to bring an example of the way, in order to understand the way Hashem condenses himself, in order to allow us to benefit from his light. So he's going to start with an example of a human being, a wise person. So here we're going to look inside. Says the Alter Rebbe, Ve'hinei, ba'adam ha'tachton lamashal. By a person down below, for example, Mishu chacham gadol lehaskil nifla'os chachma. A person who is a great sage, and is very smart, very wise to comprehend the wonders of wisdom. Now, what does he do? Umetzamtzem sichlo yomachshavtoi be'ois echad midiburei. And in order for that wise person to give his intellect to someone who is a much lower level, the wise person needs to go through a process of condensing. Number one, you have to, before he even starts to talk, he has to think by himself, in what words should I use to deliver the message, the deep message that I have in my thought, in my mind, that I want to deliver to someone else. I need to condense that message to be able to fit the capacities of the receiver, of the student. And then after you think it within yourself, you have to find the words. So this is a process of condensing the logic that the person has, and until it comes down into speech, that it will bring in speech to give it to someone else. Ultimately into a single letter of speech. This is a great contraction. It is a great descent to his wondrous wisdom. Same thing says the Alter Rebbe, precisely so, using an analogy. It's not only precisely so, but much, much more than that, with endlessly more than that. It was a great and mighty contraction. Kasher bidvar Hashem shomayim nasu b'sheishes emei bereshis. When the heaven was created in the 6 days of creation, was made by the words of Hashem, uberuach piv kol tzavam, and all of their hosts of the heavens and earth was made with the breath of his mouth. And we explained in the previous lessons this week that he ois hey shel shem avaya baruch hu asa klila. That refers to the letter hey of the name Yud and the hey and the vav and the hey, avaya, which is asa klila. It is a light letter. It is the ha, the breath, that this represents any other letter. In order that to utter a letter, you have to have this breath. It says in Genesis, it says, Eile told us Hashemayim, this is the creation of B'yom. It says Behibaram, when Hashem created them. So the word Behibaram, I would say, just tell us, it's Behei Baram. With a Hey, Hashem created them. And this, He Mokairates Ma'amorois, Shenimshechu Mimayma Rishon. And this is the source of all the 9 utterances, which they were derived from the first utterance. What is by Bereshis, when the creation of the world, it mentions the utterances of Vayomer Elokim, Hashem said, let it be light, Hashem said, everything as it says with the Ma'amar, with the utterance. But there's only 9 times that it says. And yet we know there is 10 utterances. So our sages explained that Bereshis, the word Bereshis, in the beginning, that is the first utterance. The Name Ma'amaru, this is also considered the creative utterance. And what is it? Why is it called Bereshis? So it says, Hi Pchinas Chachma. This refers to the level of Chachma. Just like we have the 10 utterances, we have the 10 attributes. The first of the attributes is Chachma, the wisdom. Hanikreis Reishis. The wisdom is called the beginning. Because everything comes from the beginning. Everything comes from the Chachma. Everything comes from that letter Yud, which is the Dat, which includes everything. However, says the Alter Rebbe, then in the beginning, when Hashem created the world, He gave it everything without any effort, without any arousal from the one below. Hashem just gave it down. He just gave it with kindness. Why? Ki Adam ayin lavad, because there was no man to work and bring about this arousal. It's like when you set your son to do a business, you give him an initiative, you give him $100,000 and tell him, go, take this, and now you start, and now you're on your own. Now get to work. Hashem, in the beginning of creation, Hashem gave us without any arousal from below, without anything on our part that we needed to do. Ki rak ki chafetz chesed hu. It occurred only because Hashem desired to act with kindness. Ve'olam chesed yibane. It is also written that the world is built by kindness. Vezeu, now the Alter Rebbe says it is another interpretation of this word that we just said. Behibaram. When the Hashem created the world, we said before, Behibaram, that he created it with the hay. So there's another interpretation that says Be'avraham. Through Avraham. Who is Avraham? Our father Avraham. Avraham was the epitome of kindness. It says when Avraham came to the world, the attribute of kindness said to Hashem, God, you don't need me anymore. I'm unemployed. Avraham is here. He is doing the kindness. Ki chesed le'Avraham. It says chesed, the kindness is to Avraham. But this was only in the beginning of the creation. But after God created the man, and he created him to what? To work it, to that he should gain his own. Azai then, kol isarusa de leila, every arousal from above, from Hashem, le'oira midas chesed elyon, to arouse the attribute of the supreme kindness of Hashem, hu beisarusa de lesata. This depends on the arousal from below. What is it? B'tzdaka v'chesed sheYisrael oisim ba'olam hazeh, which charity and kindness the Jews perform in this world. When you do the charity and kindness in this world, you arouse a kindness by Hashem, that Hashem should draw down his kindness. Lochein, therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, Amru Razal, our Rabbeinu Zichronam Levacha, our sages of blessed memory, said, Kol haomer ein li elo Torah, bli gemilut chasadim, afilu Torah eina. Anyone who says, I have nothing, I have only Torah, I don't have kindness, this is not for me, you let somebody else do kindness, I'm busy with studying Torah, says that, so I say to say, afilu Torah ein lo. He doesn't have even Torah. Why? So he's explaining now. One ought to be to engage in Torah and performance of acts of Gemilus Chasadim, loving kindness. Why? Says the Alter Rebbe, Kinei, Hagam de'iraisa mechochma nafkes. Although we know that the Torah comes from Chochma, from the wisdom, ube'iraisa miskayem alma. It's indeed, it says that the world exists and is sustained by the virtue of Torah. And it says in the Zohar, ube'inun delo anbo, and those who speak the Torah, not only when there's a Torah in the bookshelf, but when there is speaking of Torah, those who speak Torah, those who study Torah, they make the world exist. They sustain the world. Why? Because with their words, they are drawing down. By speaking the words of Torah, they elicit the illuminations and the effusions of the Torah. Or in another version, it says, Ve'ashra'os, that the Supreme Chochmah, that they bring down the effect of the Torah. Chochmah, Ilah, Mokir Torah, the source of the Torah, the supreme Chachma. Lebchinas oisius adibur shebehem nivra olam. And they bring it down to the letters of this speech that the world was created by. K'may merazal, as our sages say, we say it every morning by the end of davening. Al tikre bonaich ela bonaich. It says, V'rav shlom bonaich, peace of the children. So it says, we say, Al tikre bonaich, not the sons, ela bonaich. Bonaich means the builders, because the ones who study the Torah, they build the world. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe basically is asking, then why do we need a chesed? If by study of the Torah alone, you build the world, the Torah, the world is based on the Torah, it is foundation of the world. Nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, this wisdom of the Torah, in order to bring it down to this world, this chachma, to bring down the flow of this chachma through the letters to the letters of speech, is a great descent. You have to draw down. In order to draw down this tremendous light of the Torah, you need a supreme kindness. And this kindness draws down just like water that comes down from the top all the way to the bottom. That's what the Torah is compared to water. And water goes down. And the analogy here is also that water is the same quality of water that is on top of the mountain. The same exact water goes down to the bottom. That means in the Torah, the same, when you do it with kindness, the same Torah that is above comes down here below. And we study Torah, even though we study about material aspects. We're talking about a bull, we're talking about an ox, we're talking about objects to fill in with physical things, but all of this, the Torah, it's the same water, the same holiness, that just like it is up there above. But in order to bring it down, it says it has to come by sarusa de lesata. It by means of an arousal from below, b'tzedakah v'chesed tata'a, through acts of charity and kindness here below. Shemamshichim chaim v'chesed. When you draw down life and kindness, when you give kindness and you draw down life to revive the spirit of the humble and the downcast, then it draws down the kindness from above to bring the chachma of the Torah down below. This is what King Solomon says. That a wise man should not be glorified by his wisdom, in his wisdom. But in this, let him glory. In what? So it says, in the pasuk, it says, Haskel v'yadoya oisi, in understanding and knowing me, knowing Hashem. Why? Says the pasuk, Ki ani Hashem oisei chesed, for I am God who acts with kindness. So we see right there when the Torah says about the wisdom of the wise, the Torah connects it with kindness. With the kindness of the person, that is what you should be glorified. That is what brings down the chachma. And he explains, Ki ha-chesed hu ha-mamshich chaya chachma lemata. Because the kindness, what does the kindness do? The kindness brings down, it draws down the life of the chachma, the vitality of the chachma, and brings it down lemata, down here. Ve'im lav, and if by absence of this, if there is lacking the kindness, arei nikris chachmasai levadai. It is called chachmasai, that is only his chachma, only his wisdom. That's what the Torah says, Ali salala chacham b'chachmasai. Don't glorify with your chachma. If it's lacking the kindness to draw it down, it is just the chachma. Bli amshachas chaim mimena chas v'sholem. and there is no downward flow of life from it, God forbid. That is why, this is explained Alter Rebbe, this is what it means that when you give tzedakah, when you do kindness, this creates God's name. This is you're making God's name, that just like God's name, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey, is about condensing and drawing down to this world. The same thing when you do the kindness, you do the exact same thing, and you bring kindness and blessing to this world. So this is the end of today's class. Again, please share, please subscribe, and anybody has any questions, you can ask now. You should have a wonderful Shabbos.